All right, then. Well, thank you all for attending. This is the Sunday, November 13th Ask Me Anything with Terri Gierer. She is our research team lead, subject matter expert. She is also a hard worker in St. Charles, Missouri. She is an absentee ballot worker. She does it part time. She also works on the January 6th research and helps our database and does a lot of work with finding people for the podcast. And on top of that, she also has attended the Intermediate Community Organizer training in Dallas. We actually met before. So she's pretty well versed in the research world and she's quite involved in elections. If you want someone to talk to on the Look Ahead America Gilded server, she's someone who can answer quite a few questions. There's a bunch of us who are in the research team who will do our best to be impartial and fair when we're doing research. So, I will always step up and try to be as helpful as I can. My name is Ian Camacho, by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with me and haven't heard me before. But there are other people who are on here as well. If you actually look at the server, we do have people who are tagged as researchers. They are usually available to answer your questions about how to join research, what it's like, the hours committed, that kind of thing. So we're actually going to some of that right now. For those of you who are in attendance, just make sure you remain on mute. If you do have questions, please post them in the text chat, and I will do my best. Missy will be fielding those questions, but I'm guessing it's a smaller group today, so just pretty much I'll keep an eye out for it. So first of all, welcome, Terri. Thank you for joining us on short notice on a Sunday night. So thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the big build up. Hope I can, live up to everything that you said.
Oh, I'm not worried about you. I'm more worried about Gilded like crashing mid conversation. So that's my biggest fear. But we're all good. So yeah, Terri's fantastic. She's always reliable. She's one of the people who I know we can always count on. Um, and actually, that's the reason you're a team leader. And she has worked with all kinds of. I can't even remember how many volunteers have you had underneath you as researchers, ballpark.
Oh, and they come and go. I would say 10 to 15 maybe. So, like, maybe
Yeah,
3 team iterations, because usually you put, like, 5 or 6 on a team, and
yeah.
then
So
they fall
around
off.
like 15 to
Uh,
30, I would say you've definitely
really? That
done.
much?
Yeah. And that was before you did SME work, kind of, sorry, subject matter expert work, because I elevated you past team lead because we were able to graduate. When we were doing the 2020 work, it got pretty hardcore. And I was like, Terry was always working really late and like going the extra mile. And we kind of have these competitions at times because sometimes I'll find something she didn't catch, and she'll be like, "How did you find that?" Right? And I was like, "Oh, I did this, email combination thing," and then she'll find things I don't catch. So I'll actually run things by her, like, "Terry, what do you think on this? Is this person eligible to, vote from this location?" And sometimes she'll say no. And there's a few people I like to have a second or third set of eyes just before I make a determination because it ultimately falls on me. But she's one of the people we run it by to say, what are your thoughts, honestly? And there's a reason that she is a trusted resource in her own community. So I'm buttering her up a bit. But let me ask you, what is it like being a team leader with Look Ahead America on the research team?
So, I think it can be really challenging at times because I find it difficult when new people come on to try to train them, if that's the right word, train or bring them into the fold to explain what we're doing, how we're doing it. There seems to be a tendency to want to really nail somebody. When you're doing this research, you want to find all the bad stuff, and it's hard sometimes to dial people back a little bit and go, well, we're just trying to find information. We want to be sure that what we find is correct. We don't. It's almost like sometimes you're setting out with a notion ahead of time that this person that you're researching is going to be guilty, kind of thing. When that's not necessarily or really very rarely the case. You're just trying to figure out why are we questioning this? And then what do we have to back up what we do find about that person? So that's a little difficult, I think, for people to understand sometimes. And then it has been really nice to have H2O color artist. She's not on here today, I don't think, doing that training with the researchers, the team people, and
Hmm.
that has helped a whole lot. But still, they don't seem to. We reach out a lot we did on Discord with the direct
We don't
messaging
talk
line.
about them anymore. Not until
Oh, okay,
not
yeah,
until
got it.
lawsuit time.
Yeah, I saw that today. That's pretty interesting, and
Yeah, that actually is happening. Yeah, that's real. That's moving forward. So,
yeah.
but yeah, we are here on Gilded for the time being, and whether hopefully they are friendly with us. But yeah, no, I agree with you. And actually, let me, since you did mention training, and you are pretty strong as a researcher. How did you get how did you get good at this? Did you self train? Was it me? Was it
Yeah, I think it was
what help?
honestly
How did you get to where you are?
well, honestly, Ian, I think it was you. I think
Oh,
that,
thank you.
when I
That's
first
a good
started out,
answer.
I had yeah, I know.
That's the
I
answer I was looking for.
absolutely
Thank you.
I absolutely had really no idea what we were doing, and I started out, I think, with that Arizona, that first spreadsheet, right on the tail end of that, so I really had no idea what we were doing. Um, but I would try something and you would go, "No, no, no, that's wrong," or, there were times when I was extremely frustrated with it, and I think other researchers get that way too, so I try to, tell them, "Don't worry about it, it's okay, we'll work through this." But I was really frustrated, and I think at one time I was gonna quit and go, "I can't do this," I'm just not I don't feel like I'm getting it, like I was figuring it out, but I think you really were really easy to work with and kept pointing me in the right direction and everything and challenging me to not give up. I am one of those people that, gosh, I hate to just throw in the towel and say I can't do something. I want to give it my best shot. So you were very helpful in that regard and kept me rolling on it.
Well, thank you. I'm going to book you for another AMA just based on that answer alone. You well done. Well, you mentioned a bit of frustration, so I actually try to be very upfront. Every single researcher who has come on our team, everyone who's actually on this, pretty much except for Mordecai and Charlton, who are listening in, are researchers on our team, and every one of them can attest to the fact that I have usually spent between 30 minutes to an hour on the call and try to go in detail and say, look, this is what it's going to be like. I'm going to be honest with you. It will be frustrating at times. You won't find things, or you can't determine. And like you said, even myself, I had to dial it back a little bit in 2020 and 2021 and say, look, we have to remain impartial here, because if we're going in with a bias, we're going to taint it and we can't use it, right? Because we have to look at it. We don't want to assume innocence or guilt or whatever. We have to try to err on the side of innocence until otherwise we see evidence, right? So you mentioned some of that frustration. Um, what was the most frustrating part for you? You would say, and what would you find has been the most frustrating part with volunteers, if what they've told you, for those who actually stick around? What has been the most difficult that you would say is for them and yourself?
I think it is just following some kind of for me, once I developed a pattern of look here, start here, look here, look here, look here, you know what I mean? And that's where, again, you come in, where when you would find something when I couldn't find it, and you tell me how you found it. So there you go. There's another avenue for me to explore that I tuck away. And that's the same way with the when you're working with the research team is you got to keep going. Okay, but you failed to look here. Look, these are some other places. Go there and look, see what you can find. Google it this way, Google it that way. It's just all those little nuances that help you find the pathway to the information that you're trying to find.
Well,
And
thank you for that.
honestly, that
No,
OSINT
that makes a
video
lot of
that you got,
sense. Oh, sorry, you cut off.
the
I'm sorry.
OSINT, that was pretty scary actually, and I just gave up on that.
Sorry, you're kind of breaking up. Sorry, you said something about OSINT. What? I didn't catch the first half of what you said.
That OSINT that you had us that YouTube video or whatever it was. I don't
Oh,
know
the
what you call it.
the 4.5 hour video that I had the team watch during the summer when it was slow. Yeah, I said not to watch it all at once, but just watch it over the course of like a couple weeks or something. And yeah,
I
I had
watched
to eat
about
that
an
thing too.
hour of that, and it was really deep. It was really getting a little too
It's
deep for me,
good
and I'm like,
though. I can
"Whoa."
post that for the general if people want to start doing research. It is helpful. I learned a few things out of that too. Well, let's move away from the bit of the worst part and the negative stuff. What have you found to been the best and most engaging part with working as a researcher?
Well, actually, the best part is when you, well, if it's as a team lead, when you go to check somebody's work and it's like, "Whoa, this was awesome. You did a great job," everything's there that we need. I think it looks good, and it's good. I like to go back to that researcher and say, "This was a great you know, this is the way it's supposed to be done. You did great. You found everything you needed to find. Move on to the next one." So that's good. And then same for myself. When I find stuff, you get rewarded. It's like, oh wow, that is, this
It's
was
like
what I was
solving a
looking
puzzle.
for.
It's like solving a
It is
puzzle,
a
isn't it?
puzzle.
Yeah, it
It
is.
is like
I mean,
solving.
and sometimes you're like, okay, they're innocent, but at least I know, right? Like at least there's no
Right,
doubt there.
exactly.
Yeah, that can be frustrating, and that's just how humans are.
Yeah, you can go
Ballpark, how
down
many?
a rabbit hole.
Oh
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
we and that's why I had to kind of dial it back and say, okay, like let's just keep it in the realm of what we actually see and not in the realm of speculation, which I see a lot of groups do. And I say, yeah, but you have to prove it, or show us, like, you have to show examples and evidence of it that's strong. Let me ask you this: like, um, if you, as a team leader, was there anything you wished researchers or us we did, a little bit different as a team leader to make it more efficient, or what would you do differently to
Yeah,
make it perhaps
well,
a little tighter?
but I think we've tried the things that I do think, I think we have um, our documentation, these are the steps to follow kind of thing. You've documented those things. And if people just would kind of focus on that and pay attention to that a little bit better. There's a tendency to not do that for some reason. I'm like, yeah, but I sent you that document. Look at it, kind of thing. I don't know if people just go off on their own and think they know better or what exactly that is. But yeah, I think that was really, again, that actual online training that we do with people sometimes, and then having the documentation of here are the steps to follow kind of thing.
That's kind of funny because that relates to. I'm going to pivot a little bit to another subject now, moving out of the team lead work. Although one thing I would ask you about is like, how many hours would you say you spent as a researcher and a team lead, and perhaps even as SME? Like, I mean, obviously you can put as many as you want, but ballpark, how much have you put in per week doing this?
Yeah, I'm sure I put in somewhere between 5 and 10, just depending on
Yeah,
what project we're working on, and then how far
yeah,
into something I got. And it's like, well, I'm not stopping yet because I'm almost there kind of thing, so you go throw on another hour kind of thing when you really didn't intend to. But
right.
yeah, so yeah, something
Well,
like that. I'd say 5 to 10.
I would say it's funny going back a little bit from like the time, and because you, as I mentioned, it was like a 4.5 hour video we talked about. You put time into like researching and studying the documentation, which if you was put together, and I'm glad one or two people actually take the time to read that, because that does take time to compile. And thank you, Watercolor, when you hear this later. Um, Let me pivot a little bit to your part time absentee ballot work, because that does relate to what we do. We look primarily, but not exclusively, at election related work at Look Ahead, like whether it's legislation or whether it's, I don't know, voting records or things like that. You mentioned people don't read documentation, and I'm going to kind of jump questions a little bit. I'm quite sure, as an election worker, even though you're part time, you're working in the absentee ballot. You've had, I'm sure, people come to you and complain and say you're not doing this, or you whatever. I'm sure you got accusations. I'm guessing you don't get many compliments as a government worker. Could be wrong. Maybe it's nice they're in misery. Um,
You would be shocked.
no, maybe the people are very nice there. I don't know.
I'll tell you
Have you
what,
found that to
people
be the
were.
case where people read and look at the stuff, or have you found that's not the case really there?
Well, okay, so there's like two sides to that. So one, most of the people that have come through on this selection cycle have said thank you to those of us working, taking signing them in and getting them their ballots and what have you. They say that. A lot of them said, "Thank you so much, for being here, for doing this kind of thing." And in Missouri, the laws just changed. We got the 2 weeks of early voting before election day, so that was different. Um, Now I start 6 weeks out on an election cycle, so we start absentee ballots for 4 weeks, and then that 2 week cycle of early voting. So no excuse voting or whatever you want to call it. And people really like that a lot. And were very complimentary about how, we treated them, I guess, because everyone was friendly and nice. And you would get a person here and again that would, just try to challenge you or something like we try to verify that we have the correct address in our system, them to tell us what is your address. And you would get somebody every so often that would go, well, I'm not giving you that information. Well, we need to know that we have it right in the system. Or they'll say, well, you can just look at my driver's license because we do require the photo ID. Well, you can just look at it. But we want to know, are you the person that handed me that driver's license, kind of thing too. So it's kind of a double check. And so we would get a little pushback on that. Um, but again, most people were very pleasant. Now, I'm going to tell you on election day, I worked at the main election commission office. And so that's where the polling places send people who have issues. And the issues are that people don't keep their addresses up to date. If they have a name change, they don't change it, and they don't let the election board know that. Um, my election commission does go through the NCOA, the National Change of Address list, and if somebody's on there, they pretty much go ahead and mark them inactive in our system. So we had a lot of inactive people that would come through, and they would get very upset because that requires another piece of documentation that we have to have them fill out, and then it has to go into the office where there was one person working the computer that day to make the change in the system so that we could then give them a provisional ballot. And that was just insanity. But again, that was kind of a new thing, I think. And so um, the people that work there are going to relook at everything and reassess how that day went and stuff like that and make some changes because it was a little bit of a cluster.
Well, it sounds like all things considered is well organized in the sense of, at least for your county, obviously you can't speak for the entire United States and all however many thousand, 3,000 plus counties there are. But it sounds like it was actually pretty well organized in terms of you having to verbally confirm as well as visually confirm, as well as make sure that people are up to date, which it sounds like they don't do because they assume, like, well, they probably assume that if I'm guessing, if it was done with this clerk, it's kind of a universal system, but it's like it doesn't work that way. You have to be responsible and notify us, and that's usually what doesn't happen. Um,
And
I
we
mean,
do have
it sounds like it. It sounds. Was it an issue of there weren't enough people? Like, was this too much work for too few people, or was it like what was the experience with that? Like, were the clerks not prepared, or I don't know, because we
I
hear a
think
lot of
it's
that criticism.
So I think it is a little bit too few people. Everybody that works there was on board the whole day, but the phone system was jammed the whole time. There were phone calls coming in from the different polling places with those exact same issues. Um, so what would happen was when they couldn't get through, they would send the person to the main office, and then again, there was only like 1 to 2 people that were able to get into the Missouri voter system, whatever the registration system, to make those changes because they just don't allow very many people access to that. Um, so one of the things I even said to them, because then I subsequently went back and worked on one of the audits the other day, and in fact, I'm going back tomorrow to do. We're going to audit write-ins or something, but um, but I even said, you really need to do something like ahead of time with the media to say to people, hey, if you want your voter experience to go quickly, look yourself up on our website because we do have a county website that they can check the registration. And that way they can see, yes, are they registered? Yes, are they registered at the right address with the right name, et cetera, et cetera. And they can get that all taken care of ahead of time. It will make their life easier too. So
It kind of goes back to what you're saying, though. It's like we create the documentation, and I feel like a lot of times governments do put that out, or local, and people don't read. So I mean, but it might get a few people to cheer, and just like from what I'm hoping. Um, it sounds like you. It sounds like for the most part you were pretty well organized. As far as people challenging ballots, well, first of all, did you have anyone challenge it? As because since you are in the absentee department, did you have people challenge, and if so, was anything legitimate come forward, or did you experience that at all in 2022?
yeah, so I don't know. I don't think if there were any, I don't know anything about it. I think that probably goes in through the main people and like I didn't see anything like that. I mean, I did have a guy who was sent over to the office to vote from his polling place because he had an issue. And he was trying to tell me that we were going to prohibit him from voting because he was Republican. And I'm like, we are not going to prohibit you from voting. We're going to take care of you. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. You got to fill out another piece of paper, but you're going to get a ballot and you're going to be able to vote. But he was pretty much the only one.
Okay,
I
well
did
that's
have
actually
somebody
that's pretty good. It sounds like for the most part. Oh, sorry, there was someone else who did what now? On
there
your,
was another guy who came in who it our system showed that he voted, and he was an election judge, and he was somebody who was there for training, and he voted on the day he was there for training. So the election judges can vote when they're there because it's early voting at that point. And but he insisted that he had not voted, that somebody stole his vote, and he was just throwing a huge rant. And they finally just said, "Oh, here, we'll give you a ballot," and they put it in a special envelope so he would be quiet and go away. But he had already voted. I think he just forgot that he voted.
oh, so that's interesting because I'm wondering if they'd have to make him vote because usually they can't. Like they usually have to
It's
either turn him away or
provisional.
give provisional or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
it's a
yeah,
different provisional folder that it goes in, I think. So I'm not sure what
right.
happens with that, but I mean, the interesting part was it was his signature because they have that, from
Hmm.
when he signed in on the pull pad. They have a signature, and they're like, "Is that your signature?" Well, yeah, it's my signature. Well, then you voted. But I didn't really. I just when he was having his little rant, I went and got somebody else
That's
to.
when you find the manager, and you're like, I don't get
Yes,
paid enough for this.
yeah,
I'm
I
only
go up
part time.
another
I'm part
level.
time. I'm not even getting full time for this. I got you.
That's right.
Actually, that's a good segue. How did you get the role? And is the role only for election time, or is it a year round role, or is it seasonal? Like how do I mean? I obviously it's different county to county and state to state, but how did you go about getting that position?
No, I think because I had been just a regular election judge at a polling place on election day, I think they might have sent emails to everybody and said, "Hey, we have these positions open. They're part time. If you're interested, go into the county website and fill out the information, whatever." And I thought, yeah, I don't know. I might could do that. That might be interesting to do. So I really did a very limited application, like, oh, I'm not filling all that out, kind of thing. Lots of, putting in all my experience and stuff because I'm older. I have a lot of jobs and stuff. So I just like put in the last one or two and just minimally filled that out. And she called and I went in for an interview and it was like, well, I'm thinking we're going to try doing half days. I'm like, oh, that's perfect because then I'm only away for half a day, but it is Monday through Friday, and it is just seasonal. It's just 6 weeks prior to an election cycle. So I worked. We had an April ballots or election cycle for school boards this year, and then I worked the primaries. So 6 weeks before the primaries, I worked that, and then this midterm, so I worked that. So those 3 cycles, I did those.
Okay, so you're not making a living off it. You're just making just
Oh no,
you're
this
not
is
a career
just
politician in the world of election counting kind of stuff. Okay, gotcha. I
correct.
wasn't sure if we're gonna see Terry G running for something. Perhaps maybe she will. We'll see. I guess actually on that note, since you did volunteer to step up in your community, what would you recommend anybody do in their own county? Because I've always in Look Ahead America's always advocated grassroots, ground up, work in your own counties election.
Absolutely.
Everyone who's listening in, I think for the most part on this call, I've either know personally or have spoken to. We've always said like the county and the local election is where you have the most power. That's going to impact your day to day the most, right? You pay your taxes, your utilities, etc. What would you recommend people do in their own county and state, I guess, to improve their own elections?
So that really is um, a good question because we do have a lot of people in the county who complain about the election system. And basically, the people that work at the election commission say, come in and observe, come in, take a job. We'll give you a part time, come in and work the absentee process. We'll give you time to do that, to see, go in there and see what the behind the scenes looks like because it's not a slam dunk. There are so many little nuances to voting that you don't think about. And when you start seeing some of this, it's like, oh yeah, well that's what causes an issue, or just all these little different things that you see, and you see how they handle them and how they do a pretty darn good job, at least in my county, of taking care of these things and making decisions and what have you. So that's the thing. It Before you criticize, go check it out. And if there is something that you think is still wrong, make those recommendations, talk to the people that work there. They, where I work, they're pretty open minded. I tell them stuff I think and they listen and make changes. And, so you just have to get involved with it. You
Well,
can't
that's
just
very
make a
cool.
judgment. You can't
So
just
you
make a judgment. Yeah.
So you have experience. You have seen it from the outside before you were, when you were working with us, and now you've seen it somewhat from the inside on your level. And obviously, like nothing's perfect. There are suggestions you can make, but you work with them. And it sounds like you had clerks that were good, but you could perhaps, I don't know, perhaps one day work for the Board of Elections. I say BOE, but I'm so used to acronyms that people don't know. Be the Board of Elections, perhaps, or you could work with the clerks, or you could work with the commissioners. So you do know a bit about the process, which is good because there's too many people who I've experienced too who don't know what they're talking about, and there are legit things, and then there's just stuff that's like you said, people criticize without going in and be like, you should at least know the laws because you don't want to get shot down in public because it's gonna like just because it undercuts the legit. There is legit stuff. We have found legit stuff, but we try really hard. At least I know our team does, to stay within the confines and the bounds of the law before we present a lawsuit or we file a complaint or something.
Right,
And thank
right.
you, by the way, for all you on this call who have participated in those. I'm going to pivot a little bit here, unless you want to talk more about that role that you've been doing in absentee work.
Um,
Someone's pinging me
no problem.
directly. So you've done team lead work. And actually getting involved in your community is one of the things. Let me ask you. You said this happened relatively recently. You got involved in the primaries, and I don't think this happened until you had attended. Was it this year or last year? The ICOT. That was this year, wasn't it? Right? That was
It was this year,
March.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, time's gone. It seems like forever ago. So we did the intermediate community organizing training, or the ICOT, as Mike calls it. And you and I had met in Dallas, Texas. And how was your experience there? And when you went to that, can you tell us a bit about that for those of us who've not been to an in-person training? Because I think only Ghost Pines, who's on this call, has been to one as well.
Yeah. Okay, so my main objective for going to that was to meet you and anybody else that I had worked with on the research teams and what have you, because it is nice to put a face to a name. And but and I didn't know what to really expect from the actual sessions. So I will tell you that if I had known ahead of time that I was going to be kind of making like presentations sort of thing, not really presentation, but getting up in front of everybody, with my ideas and what have you, I might not have gone because I don't like to do that very much. But so it took me out of my comfort zone. That's always actually really a good thing. I don't always recognize that right away, but it is a good thing because it helps you grow as a person and whatever. But it makes you think harder. It's always good to be able to do that. So that was really good. It was nice to see Matt in action too, in person and in action, and to see how dynamic he is and great ideas and how he can redirect somebody, to the way that he wants them to the pathway that he wants them to go, kind of thing. Um, there were so many people that were there that I was impressed with all of the work that they're doing out in the field. I didn't know all those things were going on. So that was just really, it was nice to know that too. So from that perspective, you know, again, I'm not going to become a community activist or probably, I mean, I did kind of try to do a little bit of that with the local Republican committee here in my area. Um, they were not real receptive, actually. Believe it or not, they always invite people to come to their meetings, and then
I believe it.
they
you,
introduce
you don't got to
you.
convince. I believe it. I'm off of experience, but it sounds like you actually grew. Because I
Yeah,
personally, when I witnessed you, the way you came in versus the way you left, you were very different. So that was really interesting to
yeah.
experience. And
So
I have to say that in the what the year and a half that I've known you, you've become more engaged. You're saying you're not involved in the community, but I disagree. You're involved in part time, in the elections office. You've learned a bit. You've resolved situations. You're here doing this AMA with us, and I think our guests are all grateful that you're here. And I think the researchers are grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that you're here and you're willing to do this. And on our new Gilded, for those of you who are new, make sure you sign up for the future for gilded.gg/look ahead America. Who are listening in. So it sounded like you got out of your comfort zone. So it sounds like you would recommend it, even though it was uncomfortable. You got to meet people in person, and I think that I agree with you. It's great to meet people face to face. You're like, oh, you're actually real. You're not just some anonymous person. Like I said, Ghost Pines, who's on this call, she went to one in North Carolina. I wasn't able to attend, but she did meet Matt, and I don't know if you'd been to Dallas before, but yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense. If I remember correctly, I think it's 12 hours on the first night we had dinner was the only kind of calm night. And then it was like 12 intense or 14 intense hours. And the next day was like 6 or 8 intense hours. And it was pretty much no breathing room. Like you do your homework and you go to bed and that's it. Um,
pretty much,
did
yeah.
anything, did you notice anything shifting for you in terms of your presentations or communication or effectiveness or whatever in your community? Did you notice like coming out, like putting those tools to work right away?
Well, like I said, I don't know about putting them to work right away. I'm not really sure about how to kind of answer that, but I do feel like I haven't, a lot of people really naive about how politics work and how people work through issues, and I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say, but um, but it clarified a lot of things, you know what I mean? And like I said, I was just impressed with the work that people were doing, that I'm like, "Wow, that is just really great that they're giving their time to do that for one thing." And and that the intelligence level of some of these people to put together some of the programs and whatever that they're doing. I can't remember the one guy's name that's doing that's like on the ground there in Arizona doing the voter registrations and all of the stuff that he's kind of
Oh,
working on.
John. Yes, I know you're talking about
Yeah, I was
John. I'm forgetting his last name right now, but yes, John Restucia. Yes, he worked with
yeah,
us in Arizona. You're right.
yeah, he's really impressive. It's too bad Arizona's such a real pain, but anyway,
It's a place. It's a place to have. If without challenges, there'd be nothing to do, right? So it keeps us employed and occupied there. That's the positive spin. I'm trying to be a positive person. I try really hard in face of it. It sounds like, and that's one thing actually I have to say. Despite a lot of mega challenges, and in terms of, because we are in challenging times, I wish we could say, oh yeah, it's hunky dory. And I think, like you said, people go in naive and they think this
mhm,
is the way it's going to be. But I think also sometimes they don't realize there is corruption, or things are not as clean and easy as they thought it would be. And I guess I kind of want to bring you to something that's probably the hardest thing we deal with, which is January 6th work, right? Because that is difficult to have to read and encounter and witness, like on a, you have to, because you have to read this as objectively as you can, right? Separate yourself from the facts and the data and the um, what's the word? Like, the court cases and this thing, plus the comments that you read and things like that. So, what has been your experience with that, right? Because you have your personal views, and
yeah,
then
the
you
hard.
have your work on the database and working with Ghost Pines and I believe Watercolor, and I think there's someone else who does like this primarily. But what's that been like, trying to separate that from
Oh,
your day to day?
that's really the very, very hardest thing, because I do open those, statement of facts on each of those people and read through that. Actually, I don't read every little word because I can't hardly handle it. And so the question that goes through my mind is how much of what's in there is truthful versus how much of it is just made up to bring this person into, to arrest this person. And I just can't believe that people went to Washington, D.C. that day to attend a protest, or, to to quote the words, make their voices heard. I don't believe anybody really went there to be an insurrectionist. And the fact that I read this in mainstream media, it really just digs into my soul. I don't know how else to put that. That and you get these comments from people on Facebook when I try to put something supportive out there for the J6 people. You get all these ugly comments from people like, "Well, they got what they deserved for being there," kind of thing. And it's like, but I don't think they understand. They don't see those statement effects. They don't see how ugly some of the things that are being said about people. And then the plea agreements, when I read through those, what they're making them kind of agree to is to say, "Oh yeah, I made a big mistake and my thinking was all wrong." And they try to force them down a path to say that they felt that there is no such thing as election fraud, or those kinds of things. They try to change their mindset in these plea agreements, and that is just so incredibly wrong in my viewpoint. And I don't know. And I even
That sounds
had
coercive, and that sounds a bit like
it's very
re-education camps, like
it
Chinese re-education camps and brainwashing.
it's exactly
Um,
what it is.
sounds very familiar. Like, I mean, obviously, you and I are not there day to day, so we have to try to say how much of this is. It's tough, right? Because you also, while you want to believe them, you also have to say, well, is this person being 100% straightforward, or are they just trying to make themselves sound more like a victim here? Because you also have to read the state's case, right, and have to look at it and say, okay, what are they arguing? And then what is, if we can find it, what does the video evidence show, or what does the witness testimony show, right? Things like that, or what
Yeah,
were the statements
yeah.
online that were made during and stuff like that. So that's the challenging part, right? And
I
we
even
assembled the database there.
I bought a flag, a J6 POW flag from Chris Worrell's camp, his fundraising thing, and I have that hanging in front of my house. Well, somebody took a picture of it and posted it on Nextdoor and like, what's this all about? And then there was like a huge thread on that about how disrespectful that was to real POWs, kind of thing. And eventually I quit reading it for a little while and I went back to it and they had deleted it. I guess the moderator said it. I guess it must have been getting too ugly. So the moderator of that Nextdoor
Well, good. And you
eliminated
stuck
the
you
thread.
stuck to it and you ignored them. Actually, that's kind of my question. I was going to say, if you could pick one person's case or individual story, who would it be and why? But it sounds like you gave me your answer. It sounds like you supported Chris Worrell. Would be well, why Chris Worrell and why did you what stood out for you in that particular case? Because there's what's the case? What are we at case wise in terms of how many people have been arrested?
God, it's like
Ballpark.
over six
I thought it was over.
hundred.
I thought it was over 800. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong.
I didn't look.
I thought it was. I know it's over 600. That's for sure. I thought it was over
Yeah,
700 too. It keeps growing.
it might have
Um,
hit 700. They were really pushing right before the midterms. There was all kinds
yeah.
of stuff flying through.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so, well, I actually thought about that question, and I actually have a couple more people. I mean, Chris Worrell, I felt really so bad for him because of his medical condition. And that's the other thing. These people that have been imprisoned with zero medical care when they require it and treated like, prisoners of war or worse, actually worse, um, put in solitary, all this stuff that you read on the some of the J6 thread. I have some Telegram threads that I follow on that. So there's a lot of stuff on there. He was one. Matthew Perna, of course, breaks my heart because they pushed him so hard. He ended his life, and nobody should ever be in that position. And then the other one that really bothers me a lot is Thomas Caldwell, um, because they keep trying to say he's like a key person in the, I think it's the Oath Keepers, and I don't think he has anything to do with it at all. At least he says he didn't. So I mean, I don't know, but he's about to lose his farm because they're all having to spend their money on you know uh, the attorney's fees and all of that. I don't know. Or they don't have jobs because they're in prison, so they're not bringing in money for their family, keep their mortgages up, whatever, blah blah blah. I mean, I feel bad for every single one of them, and I've donated too many of them, but those three really stand out the most to me. Um,
Well, it's good that you mentioned the thing about people struggling with getting work at Look Ahead America. For those of you who are not aware, we do offer the Jobs for J6 program, which is connecting the January 6th arrestees and prisoners as they're released with employers in various states. Some people just don't really care what they get for work because obviously, like they or their families, who need work, right? Because these people have served their time at that point, right? It's supposed to be. The funny thing is the left used to, be about, hey, look, we need to reintegrate these people into society. We need to give them a chance. Like, look, they've paid their time, they've done their debts, right? Whether or not you feel they should have or whatever is moot at this point. We are trying to give a hand up, not a handout. So we do try to connect those. So that is one of the things we're doing. But let me ask you, not to make it too much about LA at this point, but what specifically made you interested in researching with Look Ahead America, all the groups, because other few groups doing this with January 6th database, and why is this issue so important to you personally?
well, I, like everybody else, right after 2020, was so upset with the results of the election and what can I do kind of thing. And I was listening to people on the radio, listening or things on the internet that I saw. I don't even really remember how I stumbled onto Look Ahead America, and it was just one of those deals where like, oh well, this sounds pretty good, and you were looking for volunteers. I'm like, I want to fill this out, but they're never going to call me, kind of thing. So the day when you did call him, oh my god, you really called. But yeah, and I think I actually donated to Look Ahead America at first as well because I did like the path that you all were on. I guess it was just pure luck, and I somehow stumbled upon Look Ahead America more than anybody else. Again, I did try to go the route of going to the meetings for the Republican committee here in my area. I actually did bring in a researcher, but I don't think he lasted very long from there because I think he was very nervous about maybe losing his job or something if they found out he was doing that. So I think he dropped out. But But again, they would go, well, we need volunteers for this. And I'm like, okay, here I'm volunteer. Oh, we have these committees, this committee, we're looking for people to do this, that, and the other thing. I do tend to like to deal with data and managing data. So I would, say, okay, the person that's doing the website and whatever, I'd love to help out with that. These people would never get back to me, never call me back. But every 2 months or so, hey, we need volunteers. It's like, well, I can only volunteer so many times. You didn't call me. I'm not going to worry about it.
Oh yeah,
So I
I
kind of
could relate. I can relate as a person who has to find volunteers. I speak to a lot of people who are like, "Yeah, I would do anything for this country," and then like they won't even, they won't even like open a case or something. I'm like, really? They can't be bothered, and I get frustrated. I get actually. You did mention something. I want to hop back a little bit. You said that there was someone who you had recruited and he bailed out because he was afraid of losing his job or something like that. And I guess that's a question I wanted to ask you about because you had also mentioned you had neighbors on next door who were upset that you had the Chris Worrell flag. And I'm kind of curious, what do you feel? Because I see that. I see fear on one side, and I see anger and hatred and, prejudice on the other side. And I kind of see both perspectives. Like if I was in their shoes, I could see where that comes from. I'm not saying it's necessarily logical or rational, but what have you found is the most, misunderstood or underreported detail of the politically persecuted that you found? What do you find is like the most misunderstood thing, and what do you wish people were speaking out more about regarding January 6th? Excuse me.
Oh, okay, we're going to January 6th. I just don't think people really understand what the government is doing to these people. I think they do see them as what mainstream media has displayed them as insurrectionists and, you know, coming down, hurting police officers and doing all these terrible things while they were there, and there was honestly there was some destruction of property. Honestly, there probably were some people that got injured because of the forcefulness or whatever. And of course, there are some people that probably do need to, pay fines or maybe a little bit of time in jail for what they did. But the the vast majority did nothing wrong, and they were just there. And so what I don't think they see is that they took everyone's voice away. You know, if people are thinking that, well, if I speak up, they're going to come knocking on my door, I'm just going to not say anything. And if that happens, then we have nothing left. So
Yeah, that's very true.
that's
I mean,
that's
I I,
that's where I'm
I
at right
can
now.
I can definitely relate. I was terminated from my prior job when I attended the January 6th rally. Um, I saw the president speak, and we went to the Capitol like everyone else. I did not go into the Capitol, but I did witness a lot of things from a distance, and it was very suspect myself. I've talked about this; it's not like a secret. But speaking about this, when I went to the January 6th solidarity rally, I was scared. I was afraid, am I going to get a knock on the door at the hotel or something? But then I realized, like, what's the point of hiding forever? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't speak up, then, like, it's almost like your own prison. Like, they say, like, your own prison is usually in your own mind. And I think that's something we need to, start speaking out about. Because listen, it was not a crime to attend that rally. You know what I
No,
mean?
it wasn't.
It wasn't attend, and it's like, they want you to think it was. They want you to think that it was supporting a particular president or a viewpoint or questioning certain things is a crime, which is not. They can allege it all they want. But to me, and if we want to do fair comparison, we can remember, for those of us who are old enough to remember, BJ20 in 2017, right? And those people who were protesting and burning things and smashing up
Oh,
cars and windows, they were let go within 48 hours, I think. So it's interesting how when the shoe's on the other foot.
and so that's the other thing. There is no consistency with justice at all. There's no equality there at all. It's
That's
very
why that's why
unbalanced.
we maintain its political persecution, right? Because if it was
Exactly.
equal across the board, we'd say, okay, fair enough, right? They did that in
Exactly.
2017, but nope,
I would
it's
agree.
only targeting one side.
Correct.
Not to be too negative, because we have seen a lot of positive work despite the pushback, and I know we were one of the only groups at the time speaking out about January 6th in 2021. And it grew out of a small database, by the way, like, which is really nice to have seen people contribute to it and grow, and it's still maintaining. So I'm very proud of that. And I know a lot of and I'm not even the one mainly doing it. It's so many people like you, Terry, and others on here I see Ghost and Watercolor and Missy and a number of other people have helped. But what would you like to take the public to take away from the information that we offer in the Look Ahead January 6 database or the podcast or anything like that? What do you want people listening in on this to take away from what we do? You
I
know,
think on the podcast, I think it is important to listen to these people's stories and to understand that they were not wrong for their beliefs and what they were standing up for, and that they were persecuted against. Um, from the database, I did want to kind of ask you, if you don't mind if I jump away for a minute. Do you guys you keep track of activity? You know, how many people hit that site, or take a look at that, or what they might do with it, or anything like that?
are you talking about like website hits? How many people check it? Is that you're like I know
Yeah,
you're
like
talking
on the
about. I
yeah.
personally don't have that, but I could get it. But our person who does IT kind of maintaining the database, Grok Y, if he's listening on this, I hope you come back on Gilded. We miss you, but
Yes.
we can get him. He has access to that, and I believe we do have the metrics on it. But yes, the I know the rally we did on September 18th, which people have made many memes about since, by the way. So, hey, that became famous. But that supposed glowy FBI rally, which was not one, and actually we had no arrests at the rally at all, believe it or not. It was very well done, and I'm very proud that we put that on because it did get things to start moving. But no, we can track that. That actually is probably the reason people check out Look Ahead America is the January 6th podcast, the database, the different work we've done. But
I
yeah,
know
it peaked, at that time was that we had the most people checking in.
and I know on some of the Telegram channels that I'm on regarding January 6th, sometimes somebody's like, where can I get this information, on this or that or the other thing, which I know we have on our database, and I'm constantly pointing them that way. So I was just wondering in that regard. Um, and I do know that some have copied what we have done, or even probably downloaded some of our information to put into their own kind of database thing. So that's kind of nice for us too. That's a win for us. But out of that, I don't know. I mean, you can look at the different statistics and what have you, and then you can see, how the sentencing is really odd on this too. In my view, I've been trying to track a different spreadsheet on my own off to the side, to kind of go by the sentencing judge, and then the actual what their plea deal was, what they were pleading to, and then what was the actual sentence. It's kind of all over the board. Somebody gets maybe some probation and a fine, or the court restitution fee, whatever, and maybe some community service hours, and then other people have gone to jail for a month. For the most basic one was the parading, demonstrating, and whatever in a Capitol building. That's the one that they plead most to. And but again, it's all, some people have gone to jail for that and some have not, and they don't have any previous convictions or any other uh, you know
It's a lack of
record.
consistency, and
It's a
it's like
huge lack of
it's a lack of
consistency.
consistency. And it's a violation of a number of constitutional. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people think we actually Charlton, who's listening on this, we were talking about this today. People were saying, "Oh, if I lived in the slavery times, I would have been those people who helped with the Underground Railroad, or if I lived in the Nazi times, I would have helped, get people out of like Holocaust Germany or something." And it's like, no, you wouldn't. I mean, you're living in stuff like that now, and you're not doing it. And
We're not
you
doing
listen
it
to
right.
Jordan. When you listen to Jordan Peterson, he says like, most of you wouldn't do that, and a lot of comedians have made that like, no, you wouldn't. Like a lot of, I mean, we're definitely in the minority, unpopular group here. So, and what we are doing, I am guaranteeing that I am probably myself on some radar. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm not doing anything illegal. So you keep watching. I hope you guys, find it. However, that being said, and then someone pops in. Hey, hold on a second. Muting you. Hold on a second. Thank you very much. Still working out the bugs. We're doing pretty good overall. That was just one. I actually wanted to jump to a few questions that we did have from the audience since it is an AMA and we have about 8 minutes left until we hop to the movie screening. These are all from Tom Z, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh, okay. He's kind of new, right?
He has a few, yeah. He's on our team, I think. Actually, I think he's on your team. Let's go back to, since we're talking about January 6th, we did talk about the 2020 riots. The left organized massive fundraisers to bail out protesters. Why can't we, I assume he's like the right, the conservative, why can't we do the same? And what is your thought about the future for the January 6th database and the movement?
Well, actually, after and I hate to be negative, but after Tuesday or of late, I was really hoping that if the red wave came, that we would get more focus on these on the January 6th that have been arrested and they're still in prison. We would get more focus on that and start moving to get those people out. But now, with the way things have gone, I think it's going to just fade away, and that's really sad too. So I'm hoping that maybe with our database and the things that Look at America does, that we can keep pushing that to the forefront a little bit and keep it in front of the representatives and the senators, and try to get some movement on that. And every one of these, well, almost all of the those that are still in prison or whatever do have fundraising sites on Give, Send, Go or whatever. Um, so if we could just, I don't know. I don't know how to get that out there more because again, anytime I try to do it, I just must not have great friends because the negative comments are just terrible.
Well, I think it's very easy to get caught up in the negativity. Sorry, I'm getting a bunch of pings right now from questions. And actually, if you want to, guys, if you want to put questions, don't ping me because it kind of like messes my screen up. Just go ahead and put them in the general chat for the AMA, and I can see them there, or Missy can field them and post them in for you. But as far as listen, Terry, we're not asking you to solve the world. Like we're asking you to like help. Just to help where you can. You've already done quite a lot of things, so we're not asking you to solve everything. As I said, we have tried to offer as many avenues to let people hear the prisoners speak. We have tried to offer
Yeah.
the January 6th database. We have offered rallies. We are offering the Jobs for J6 program. We're always willing to hear other ideas. I spoke at the Solidarity rally. Like we are looking to keep assisting however we can and keep them in the forefront. I will say we don't know the final outcome of the midterms, so I am trying to remain cautiously optimistic and wait until the final results come in before making an assessment either way. Like as difficult as that is, I'm trying to just focus on other things right now because that's all I can really do. But I agree with you. It's somewhat discouraging, but like I said, that's kind of what I was saying. People would say, "Oh, I would have done these things back then different." Like, I don't think that's true. I think it's nice to say that until you're faced with, people don't want to do what's unpopular. And even me, even saying, "Oh, was I worried about people coming after us?" Um, I don't. I'll put it this way: if they don't speak up, I think that will eventually be the case. And right now we're still relatively free. And I hear people say, "Oh, we don't have any freedom." Da da da. I'm like, well, yeah, it's because you're not bothering to step up, right? And it's like if you're not willing to do it now, when things are relatively easy, there's no way in hell you're going to do it when it's hard. So I think we have to do and you're not doing anything revolutionary. You're literally just gathering open source intelligence and just putting it in one location. And I'm actually I have another question from Tom. Sorry to shift gears a little bit, but I'm trying to go through all these questions here. He has one that's more LA specific, but maybe we can figure this out. I'm going to switch out of J6 real quick. Moving into future elections, since you did work on the last one. What would you say to educate the public on what to check for in their county election offices? Because you did mention stuff like discrepancies. Like, what would you? Because you had mentioned like a media blast. What would you do that like people could be better educated on moving forward into the future elections?
I'm unfortunately don't have any good answers to that, um, because I, I personally think our county does a really darn good job, and our county director of elections is very good. He's always reassessing, things that don't go well, or he's trying to be efficient. Uh, we try to offer every possibility for someone to have the right to vote, to get a vote in if they're disabled or whatever. There's 15. Somebody put a thing on Facebook the other day because on election day it says there is curbside available, inquire, come inside and ask for help, have somebody come in and get help. Well, if you're handicapped and you can't get out of your car, there is no phone number to call to have somebody come out to your car. You have to have somebody with you to go in to get someone. But at the election commission, there is specific parking spots for people to park in that has a phone number they can call. We take a team out there to their car and we get them voted. We bring, we get their, look up their information, get their ballot, whatever, and we get them voted. But even barring that, there's the permanent disabled application they can fill out so that they can get a mail-in ballot anytime there's an election. A card will be sent to them that says, "Hey, do you want to get a mail-in ballot for this election? Yes or no?" And then they'll send it to them or whatever. And so even just the general absentee ballot, if you can't get in there, there's easy ways to do these things online, by phone. I mean, there's just a lot of ways for people to be able to vote. So there's never in our county any kind of restrictions to anyone voting. We even
I
have
agree with you. I
we have
agree with you
our
that we
people
make it
come
so
by
you make
and
it so
vote.
available. You guys have made it. I see a lot of groups have made it so available. I think at a certain point, people can't wait on everyone to do something for them. Like
Right.
you have to be responsible to clean up your records. Like, hey, you changed your name, you've got to notify everyone. Like, hey, my name
Right.
is. You're supposed to do that by law, by the way. It's not supposed to like automatically happen. Hey, you changed your address. Cool. You're supposed to notify everybody. You change your address, right?
Right.
And they get huffy and puffy, but it's like, hey, it's for your own protection. We're trying to prevent identity theft here. So it is incumbent on the people to have responsibility for their lives. I know, a crazy concept in 2022, but believe it or not, that is a thing we're supposed to do. So it sounds like that is being worked out, but it does sound like they listen to your suggestions, which is fantastic. And I guess on the note of suggestions, I am going to suggest that we wrap this up. That it has been 1 hour. We are going to move on to, I believe we're going to be doing the January 6th movie, if that's correct. I don't remember which movie we're screening. I do apologize. Ruck, if you would mind typing in what we're showing. Okay, Patriot Purge. Thank you, Ghost. I appreciate it. I was trying to remember what movie we're scrolling tonight. Yes, that changed everything with Discord, so we are trying to move and pivot, but I think we did a pretty good job. And I think it's great to see we had a nice turnout. We had about, what did I say, 10 people? So that's pretty cool. Or 11 people if we include us. So, hey, and whoever's going to be listening to this later on YouTube. So, Terri, I want to say thanks again for showing up on a Sunday night. Really appreciate you answering all the questions. If people are on Gilded, they are welcome to ask me questions about the research project. J6, anything we're doing with elections. And are you okay with people reaching out to you and saying, hey, what's your experience like? If you're okay with that, I would be happy to do so,
Yeah.
because that'd be fantastic. They could ask you how it works. And for those of you who have not signed up yet and are listening on YouTube, please sign up on Gilded. That's GUILDED.GG/look ahead America. There are dashes between those words, so look ahead America, or just search it on Gilded. You'll find it. Yeah, and we would love to have you sign up as a volunteer. If you can't volunteer with us, you're always welcome to make a donation. It is tax deductible. It is the end of the year, so this is the time to do it. And otherwise, we're going to go watch a movie. Thanks again for showing up, everybody, and you have a great rest of your night. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.